Welcome to episode number 46 we have now of the Rugby League Coach podcast. I'm Lee Addison and I'm hosting once again. I wasn't due to, but Taylor Brown, who's due to host, is the last time he spoke to me was on the tarmac. He's just texted me now, only just getting to the hotel and he's got to check in and eat, he said. So I'm just going to text. I'm going to text him when you boys talk. With us today is Chris Bugden, all the way from the Sunshine Coast, and James Varley, all the way from the United Kingdom. We'll start with you, James. How many times have you watched the King's coronation?
I watched it for a bit on Saturday before I started work. Just just briefly before I started.
What was your favourite bit, mate?
I only watched it for about 10 minutes, to be honest. Just when they were giving the rings over and everything to Charles and Camilla, and that was about it. And then I watched a concert last night that they did at Windsor Castle. I watched that. So that was on BBC.
We might not get Taylor. He's having a few dramas. We'll see. Chris, did you ignore all the football this week to watch the coronation?
Yeah, if you reverse that statement, you'd be a lot more accurate.
Oh, okay. So no royalists here, then, I assume. Are you a royalist, James?
I'm a bit open-minded about it, Lee, really, to be honest. You know, I'm fairly open-minded. So sitting on the fence a little bit.
Yeah, all right. You've got splinters in your backside. Let's get on with the real stuff anyway, the Rugby League.
Yeah.
I'm just going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to start with my topic, if that's all right. The one I want to start with, the one that has sort of intrigued me a little bit this weekend is about the Sydney Roosters. Are they gone as a Premiership force? Chris, I'll start with you.
Well, I think it's a bit early to write them off. I think they've still got a few issues there that, if they come good, they're still a cracking side. On paper, their best 17 is a very, very good side. I don't know. I was listening, interestingly, to the ABC call of one of the games as I was coming home from Magic Round. I went and watched one of the first game yesterday, and Grant Bell, who was the original Cowboys coach in their first year, was talking about how he doesn't see Joey Manu as a 5'8" in any sense. And Johnny Gibbs, who's an old halfback from 1,000 years ago, agreed. And they didn't go into a lot of detail, but I was just interested to hear that, considering there's a lot of knowledgeable people out there that love it when Joey Manu is in the 6 jersey and love it when he's playing that position. But they've got a lot of. They just don't seem to have any stability at the moment, I think, which is hurting them. And in the way the competition is at the moment, it's very close and it's very tough. And unless they can settle into some combinations, I don't think it's going to get easier for them. But I wouldn't write anyone off this at this point in time this season. It's one of the most open seasons that I can remember. And I certainly wouldn't write off a club like the Roosters. No way.
One of my friends on Facebook wrote, my friend Jay Buchan, he wrote, they need a good hooker. Need a good hooker. And I was just hoping that he meant the type that plays in the rugby league field rather than... It's just the way he wrote it. It looked a bit comme ça, if you know what I'm saying. James Tedesco today has talked about connectivity or lack of, and how there just seems to be a little bit of lack of connectivity there. On the subject of James Tedesco, I'm going to once again put forward that he might be worth a go at 5'8". He played for me at 5'8". He shows 5'8" skills. I think possibly his game has become a little bit convoluted now because he feels like he has to create a little bit more than he used to. And because of the changing combinations that keep on happening around the scrum base. So I think they've got room to make one more, have a crack at one more thing if they want to. And then otherwise they've got to go back to Walker and get him back in the side again, and hopefully he settles into it. James, do you have an opinion on... Sorry, go on.
I was just going to ask, but sorry, James, before we do move, what is a good 5'8"? There's so many different opinions. Most positions, I think, do have fairly... When you describe the role of a front rower, when you describe the role of a halfback or a hooker, there isn't as much conjecture as when when the pundits or the experts or whatever describe the role of a 5'8".
Okay,
What's your view on that, Lee?
Mine is it depends on what you've got in your team. So the traditional thought process for a standoff or 5'8" is that they tend to run the ball a little bit more, maybe 60% of the time or 75% of the time they run it, 25% of the time they pass it or something like that. And the half is the flip of that. 25% they run and 75% they pass. Personally, I like both to be considered for what they bring to the table. So the traditional model is the halfback organises, the second receiver is the 5'8". I've played that system. I've played left and right, so it doesn't matter. So they both have similar qualities. I don't think there's any such thing as a perfect 5'8", and I also think something else comes into it is the way you play your lock too. So in the past, I've had a pivotal number 7 in the middle who's had a lock on the left and a 5'8" on the right, and they've sometimes swapped. So, or a fullback can play that role too. So it literally depends on the makeup of your team. James, can I bring you in and tell me what you think about that, about scrum bases and fullback and lock forwards, or loose forwards as we call them in England?
Yeah, loose forwards in England. Yeah, I'm just thinking, really, on each side of the ruck, would you ideally have a 5'8" as first receiver on one side and a halfback on the other side? And a
depends where the play the ball is. Depends where the play the ball is. If it's in the middle of the field, then yeah. If it's on a scrum line, you want them both on the open side.
You do. I think it's interesting how we talk about the 5'8", because remember Danny Maguire at Leeds, he was known for his supreme support play.
Yeah.
Because there's one thing that's
yeah.
I do think it's interesting where you say about Tedesco maybe playing 5'8". Is he a better pivot than
when Teddy played 5'8" for me, or standoff as you'd call it, James? You don't have to talk Australian like me and Chris. New listeners will be thinking he sounds English to me. Why is he saying Australian?
Yeah, exactly.
The Tedesco, I used to just say to him, "Let it flow." I never programmed him. I gave him tips, obviously, about what he should have around him and what he should do in certain parts of the field. But the halfback was under instruction to give him the ball whenever he asked for it. It was that simple, really.
Yeah.
So, and it worked a treat for him. And he had a great season, amazing season. I personally, as a coach, I see the number 6, the number 13, and the number 1 as pivotal in terms of that dictates the game plan of your team a little bit. Sometimes the number 6, I've played with one halfback before and never had a 5'8". I've played with an extra prop in the number 6 jumper.
Mm-hmm.
I've also played with a prop in the 6 and the 7, except they didn't fit in those jerseys, so they had to play in their jersey and somebody else wore the 6 and 7. And the fullback was the halfback.
And I think, Lee, after you saying that, and I agree 100%, but I think in my early days of coaching, I fell for this trap, and I think a lot of coaches do fall for the trap of trying to emulate what they do in the NRL. Which is highly structured, and there's plays and there's structures and there's a situation or a scenario for almost every spot on the field. But I think exactly what you're saying, especially at any level down below semi-pro or anything like that, you really don't have to stick to those left and right structures. And I
don't know if you do in professional game either.
Well, I agree.
Do what the heck you want, really. It's
yeah, but there's too much fear from the newer coaches, I think, in a lot of situations where they're not prepared to experiment too much. And I'd love to see a little more experimentation too.
I've gone into a game without a hooker and used my left second row as dummy half if the ball was on the left, and the right second row was to hang on the edge. And if it went on the right side of the field, my right second row went into dummy half, and the left second row hung on the edge. Anything like that allows you to put an extra prop forward on the field, and in theory gives you more go forward. I've done plenty of things like that. So I'm probably the wrong person to talk to in that sense, because I just see the whole thing as fluid, and I see the 6, the 7, the 13, and the 1. You can get really creative in and around those positions and do whatever you want with it. And obviously, if you put a lock in like a Paul Gallen, it means you're probably going to play a little bit more direct. If you put a lock in like Brad Fittler, you're probably going to play a little bit more expansive. Chris, have you got a topic?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys are going to like it as much as I do, and I don't know if the listeners will. So feel free to can it early.
What a great intro, also what great characteristics of a question. The listeners won't like it. The viewers. I mean, anyone would think we were in the entertainment industry with this podcast, wouldn't they? You know.
Well, yeah. Forgive me if I've overshot and sold it too hard, but I loved Magic Round yesterday. Most importantly, because of the number of retro jerseys I saw around, and I just absolutely loved it. And I was just going to ask some of you guys what. And unfortunately, we don't have too many guys on the show other than me that were in Australia through the 70s and 80s and 90s that could maybe talk about the retro jerseys. But mate, I loved seeing, and you can see I've got my Victor Magpies one on, but just seeing the old jerseys around, it was just fantastic. And the nods and winks you'd get from people in the old Manly and the old Video Easy Canberra Raiders. And I saw an Illawarra Steelers with a Kaiser Stuhl sponsor on the front, and I absolutely loved it.
James, do you have retro jerseys at home?
We're just getting, it's a bit of a coincidence actually, we're getting some retro jerseys for the amateur club that I'm involved with now.
Okay, what are they doing with that?
Well, I think it's a 75-year history of the club, the 75th anniversary. And they're starting to get some retro jerseys for the youth teams at the club. Not the particular team that I'm coaching yet, but they're starting to bring that in. So that's quite interesting that we'll bring that up. It's just tradition for a club, really, I suppose. It's like St Helens over here, like St George over there, always known with the white with the red V, and it's just symptomatic of the club.
I think there's another topic here, Chris, if you don't mind.
Yep.
It's have they messed around with our jerseys too much?
Yes.
I think they have too, because and they do it in the Premier League a fair bit too. But look, you know that Manchester United are going to basically be in red. Man City, my team, are a little bit guilty of this. They go through different colours, shades of blue, and their socks change colours and this, that, and the other. You know that Liverpool are going to be in all red. You know that Spurs are going to be in white shirt, dark blue shorts. And I think there's only a few clubs that sort of stick to their guns when it comes to the jersey. The Roosters, St George, and St George have done quite well considering of the pressure that came through from the Illawarra side of to keep that jersey. So they obviously fought for that. The South Sydney Rabbitohs are pretty good at staying loyal to their colour scheme, although they have tinkered with the size of the hoops a little bit. Your club, I think, have messed around with it too much. I mean, that's the West Tigers, therefore the Western Suburbs history, and the Balmain Tigers history. I'm trying to think of some others. Parramatta, I mean, if Parramatta kept their jerseys quite similar all the years, that would be iconic, but they've probably messed around with that too much. Newcastle, I wish it had stayed with red and blue stripes, nice thick stripes. You know, I could go on and on and on. What other clubs have really stayed with their jersey, mate? I think most of them in Australia have messed around with them, haven't they?
They have, and Lee, I don't know, somewhere in the last decade or so, there was a change in policy because the clubs weren't allowed to change their jerseys more than once every 2 or 3 years or something like that. Now, that's obviously been relaxed because they do change it every year, and they've got, commemorative jerseys for a lot of occasions. And I've got no problem with that. I think, the commemorative jerseys and the Indigenous round and those sort of things are fantastic. But it does stink a little bit of clubs just wanting to sell a new jersey every year.
Let's think of the English Super League, James. No young kids now would know exactly what a Bradford Bulls jersey is, would they? I mean, I know they're not in Super League, but the old Bradford Northern, the old Bradford Northern jersey used to be quite distinctive, didn't it? A certain V shape.
The red, amber, and black. Thinking a distinctive one, Lee. Hull FC, black and white.
Yeah, they're pretty good with that.
Yeah.
St Helens, like you mentioned. Wigan have messed around with theirs, mate, quite significantly over the years. And they don't need to.
Leeds blue and amber. They're blue and amber, aren't they, Leeds?
Yeah, but even they've messed with their jersey.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, they have.
There's not, the Roosters jersey has hardly changed throughout my lifetime anyway. The St George jersey has not changed, even with a merger. The Kangaroos jersey doesn't change. There's subtle differences to it, but the Kangaroos jersey doesn't change. It's the same. They've messed around with the New South Wales and Queensland jerseys a bit too much for my liking too. And I think that's the next layer to your question, Chris, isn't it? Because one of the reasons that you're tipping the wink to your mates at Magic Round is because that's the jersey that they all associate with their club and their opponents.
Yeah. And they were selling the retro jerseys out of the merchandise stalls as well, so that probably helps. But, I just love seeing them. I even saw an old Western Reds one, and they were only in the comp for a couple of years, and South Queensland Crushers. And, that adds to the atmosphere of Magic Round too. It's certainly a special atmosphere. I've loved it every time I've gone.
James, your topic?
Yeah, the importance of a reserve grade scholarship academy rugby to a club. I don't know really. No, I'm not an expert of the system in Australia particularly, but Tony Smith was going on about this with Hull FC. That it's crucial.
So junior grades, you're basically talking lower grades. The importance,
lower grades for a club. Yeah.
Who do you want to answer your question first? Pick someone.
Well, you go first, Chris. I'll let you have the first say on that.
Yeah, can I just start? Are you talking about at the professional level, the professional clubs, or at community level, or
professional clubs?
Yeah, I think they've been.
What is the actual system in Australia?
Depends which club you look at, to be honest, James.
Right.
Some clubs do have a genuine. Well, I wouldn't even call it genuine anymore. I don't think it is a genuine reserve grade because they play in a different competition now. When I first started following rugby league, it was the New South Wales Rugby League. The West Magpies, for example, had A grade, they had reserve grade, they had under 23s. And if they were playing Parramatta that weekend, they played Parramatta in A grade, Parramatta in reserve grade, Parramatta in under 23s. There's nothing like that anymore. They don't even have curtain raisers to NRL games in most situations. And if they do, if the West Tigers were playing Parramatta, for example, then West Tigers would have the West Mag. This year, it would be the Western Suburbs Magpies as their New South Wales Cup side, which is kind of their reserve grade, I guess. But another factor that has watered it down, the NRL clubs over here now, James, have what they call feeder clubs. So the West Tigers feeder club is the Western Suburbs Magpies. Parramatta play their New South Wales Cup side as Parramatta. The Queensland competition's a different competition again, so the Broncos send their boys back to 2 or 3 different clubs, and none of them are called the Brisbane Broncos. But and I think another factor in it is that the NRL salary cap system and things like that only allow them to have 30 players plus a handful of development players on their books actually paid by the NRL club. So it's a little bit messier than what it used to be, James. I would love to still be able to go and watch a game of footy where I see the young fellas whether it be the under 20s or 23s or whatever they want, then the reserve graders, then the A graders play. That's obviously showing my age, but I think they're crucial because it helps you build the culture of the club. I really do. I think it helps build a little bit of loyalty as well, which is no longer really much of a factor in the professional game. But I also won't hold my breath waiting to see it ever come back.
Your original question, James, was how important is it? And I think in an ideal world, every club would have enough money to have, and every coach would want a reserve grade, an under 20s or 21s. I'm using the Australian model here, an under 18s and under 16s, and they could have a nice steady flow through, couldn't they, Chris? And it'd be nice and clear and transparent. The problem is over here is what's happened is we had a decade of the NYC, the National Youth Competition, and basically that made reserve grade almost redundant in many ways. And what basically happened is the feeder clubs started coming back into it. The problem with feeder clubs is that you don't always have complete control of coaching appointments, depending on the deal that the clubs have done. Coaching appointments, what training they're doing. There might be a geographical difference between the host club and the feeder club. The other problem with reserve grades too is that quite often they can be full of players that never, ever, ever get to first grade. So from a club perspective, if you've got a reserve grade where 2/3 of them are never going to play first grade, why pay for them?
Yeah, true.
So that's why I said the the at the start in an ideal world if there was enough money, because that's the problem. So all these decisions are often made on money and cost. So going back to England, there's been all sorts of different permutations. There was 18s and 21s at one point with 7 overage players allowed, or it might have been less. And I actually thought that was a great system, because I remember under 21s with Harvey Howard, who was 32, playing in it, and a few others. And I always liked that system, because what that meant was that you got rid of that deadwood that never ever played first grade, that were just taking up a wage and staying in reserve grade. They were never going to make first grade. But it also put young players on the same field as experienced players. So again, it probably depends on the circumstances at the time. So go back. What's the system in England now, or at your club, or wherever? What system has made you think about this?
Well, it's just what I was just reading the article. I read in the news articles before this, and Tony Smith was talking about it. But there is dual registration now here.
Yes,
where the Super League teams let players play for the Championship. Leeds have got a tie with Bradford. And they've got a few players there. Keith, they've got a tie with Hull KR, which is a fairly new one. And that seems to be the system now.
And what that's done, I mean, what if the two draw each other in the Challenge Cup? So it's weakened the Challenge Cup, hasn't it, to an extent?
It has. And what does that do to to an extent to the squad? What rules do the Super League team have? If they say a player does that player have to play for the team on that weekend?
That's right. It's and I one thing I do dislike about the feeder club system, Chris and James, or the dual registration system, is that it means the lower club is in debt to the Super League club or the NRL club. So people used to go and pay to watch the Queensland Cup side, so they still do, but in bigger numbers, the Queensland Cup sides and New South Wales Cup sides. Now they're essentially just reserve grades for the NRL sides, and you could almost argue it's a little bit like that in England, but not completely. It's sort of like halfway, isn't it?
Well, it is a bit, because a few weeks ago, James Donaldson, who's been a fairly regular first teamer for Leeds, was playing for Bradford just as a one-off.
Yeah, okay.
So,
I mean, and this, I tell you what's bad about this as a Bradford fan too. It wasn't that long ago you were watching them in Super League, mate, and Leeds were their whipping boys.
They were, giving Leeds.
It's like Man City sending players to Manchester United.
It is
gone down a division.
Well, yeah, it is. I remember the crowds being 20-odd thousand and also being full.
I do
one of those
too.
games looking now.
Run with the Bulls, we're all right. As you know, halfway through the pod when I'm hosting it, I'm not boring like Taylor or Chris. I like to throw in something that's absolutely nothing to do with rugby league, and then at the end I'll do the same. So one thing that we didn't mention last week is last Thursday was actually May the 4th, which is Star Wars Day. I don't know if we've got Star Wars fans here, but what I want to know, Chris and James, and we can talk about people who aren't on the pod. So, for example, Reneel, I would say he's a little Ewok. What Star Wars characters have we got here on the Rugby League Coach podcast? I would say Chris is Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he's too cranky. Obi-Wan isn't cranky.
He's one of the only ones I know. I've only watched the ones that come out in the 80s.
I mean, clearly I'm Han Solo or Luke Skywalker. I suppose Taylor can be Luke Skywalker, blonde hair, you know. Who are you, James? Tim can be Chewbacca.
I'm actually Googling it, Lee. I'm like Chris, I'm not an expert on it, really.
Oh, terrible question then. You know,
the only guy
the big hairy one.
The only guy I know from one of the, I don't even know which ones to call them, the prequels or the 1, 2, 3s or the ones that come out after the original 3 is, I guess if I want to pursue the cranky old man thing, is it Boba Fett?
Boba Fett. He was in all of them.
Was he?
Yeah. One way or the other, yeah. He might not have been in the original, but he was in number 2, the original number 2 and the original number 3, yeah. He dies in Return of the Jedi, which is number 6, and then he was, yeah. I want to know who the little wise man is, like Yoda. Again, you could be Yoda, Chris, but you're too cranky. Mind you, Yoda was a bit cranky too. And you're taller than I thought you were. So Taylor
yes.
Taylor can be Jabba the Hutt.
I'm googling it now, Lee. So I see who all these characters are as well.
In fact, Rosie looking at him last week, he was probably Jabba the Hutt. Actually. Not Jabba the Hutt. Chewbacca. Jesus' face was hairy. I forgot to say about Rosie. Rosie's having some kind of procedure tomorrow. So,
best of luck.
Yeah, he said something about having to be near the bathroom or something. So, yeah.
Right.
So they'll be trying to find if he's got any balls. Huh? Go on, have you got anything for us, James?
What, on these characters?
Yeah. I tell you what, some bars in West Yorkshire I've been to are like the bar in the first Star Wars where they walk in and it's all these funny looking creatures and the music's in the background.
I think was it Patrick Stewart in Star Wars? Am I right with that? Or am I totally wrong with that?
No, he was in Star Trek.
He's from Huddersfield, I think. So he has a West Yorkshire connection, but I got mixed up with that one there.
I don't know if he was in Star Wars or not, to be honest, but he was definitely.
I don't think he was in Star Wars.
No.
James, you've come ill prepared again. I'm not saving you. All right. My questions are pretty simple today. The next one is: are Melbourne Storm gone as a rugby league force? James, I'll start with you.
They seem to be struggling a bit this season. Definitely. I just suppose that they've lost some pivotal players. I'm just looking at the table now where they are. Well, 6.
Where are they? 6.
6.
Everyone else would be happy with that.
Well, they would, but they've been an institution, haven't they, for a lot of years? I mean, how long has Craig Bellamy's been there? Ever since it started, hasn't it? Ever since?
No. It was Chris Anderson originally.
Chris Anderson. Right. I didn't realise it. Right.
04, I think 04. 2004 was
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. They just seem to be. Is it a period of transition for them, perhaps? Yeah,
it's been a long time coming in that period of transition. It's
it has. I mean, Ryan Pappenhausen. I mean, I just kind of take a glance sometimes at the NRL games, but Ryan Pappenhausen, is he out with the team at the moment? I'm just looking at something. Yeah.
When's he back? When's he back, Chris?
The latest I heard on the weekend was his latest statement was, "I'm just going to make sure I'm good." He won't put a date on it. As far as not that I've heard recently, anyway, he won't put a date on it. He's had a few setbacks and things haven't gone according to plan. But it was horrific. It was really bad. His patella was almost cracked like an eggshell. So he and seeing, like, I've seen a little bit of video footage of him, and the shape of his knee is still very different to the shape of his other one. The shape of his injured knee is still very different to the shape of his other one. So I don't know. And he's dodged the question, but he has been asked, whether he'll still get back this season. And his goal is yes, obviously, but I wish him well, because he's a big part of the Storm's arsenal, and I would never, ever, ever write off a Melbourne Storm. And my experience, every time they get written off is when they tend to come back even stronger. But
so have you just answered the question there?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you think they miss Ado Carr? It was that potent for it out wide.
I don't think wingers win your competition.
No, but possibly missed. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure Melbourne tend to lose players that they want to keep.
No,
very rarely.
Yeah,
very rarely. What's your next topic, Chris?
Well, I'm going to throw a similar one to you at James, or both of you who know more about the English Super League than I do. But St Helens gone? They got beaten again on the weekend by the Dragons, wasn't it? By Catalan?
They did. I'm just thinking. We've said once or twice, Lee, that it's a high pressure job for Paul Wellens to have on his first head coaching job.
Is there much of a personnel change from last year, player wise?
Don't think so.
I don't think there is particularly. No. It's just looking down the first team squad. Not really. No. I think there's rumours that Jack Wellesby's going to come to NRL, isn't there? I saw something.
Oh, they keep mentioning it. Yeah. It's funny though. Some English people never want to leave England, do they, to live abroad? Likewise, some Australians don't want to leave Australia and play in England. I mean, somebody like James Rugby would have done great in the NRL, and everyone talks about these things as if they should have done it, and they're not the complete player. Well, what if the fella wanted to stay at home with his family?
Well, I'm thinking of one.
That trumps everything, really, doesn't it? So,
can they earn similar money? Can they earn similar money in the UK Super League?
Over the years, 20 years ago, the pound was a lot stronger. Now it's dropped, and they don't earn the salary cap's nowhere near now.
Okay,
so the salary cap in Australia that's why you've got so many English players here.
Yeah,
so you can earn a lot more money over here, basically.
But relatively speaking, can they set themselves up for life with 10 years in the Super League?
Maybe not life now. Depends what you do with it. Yeah, I don't think it's. I think you can if you structure yourself. Yeah, the top players, but that's a different question again, isn't it? I think St. Helens might not be winning the title this year. I've got to be honest. To answer your question, to be quite frank, do you have an opinion on it, Chris?
I haven't watched any in the last couple of weeks, but look, it's an uneducated guess, but just looking at the table, there's some teams there that I'd love to see. Catalan, were Catalan in the grand final last year or preliminary?
No, it was Saints and Leeds last year. Catalan were knocked out by Leeds.
So the grand finalists are now then at 7th and 8th on the table at the moment.
Mm. Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah.
Leeds are leaving it late too if they want to make them.
Yeah, they've been poor. Leeds have been pretty poor this season for a lot of it. I've not watched a lot, but it is time in your run, I suppose. Team's time in the run.
Yeah, there's definitely that. There's a lot of criticism coming Rowan Smith's way about recruitment of players. I've noticed.
Did a good job last year. Well, yeah, there is at the moment. And they just seem they did a good job last year. He did a good job last year to turn it around. I mean, how many times did they come from 5th or 6th when Brian McDermott was in charge?
Yeah.
To win it.
What's your next topic, James?
Ironically, going on about that, following on from that Leeds game, really, one of the ones I had listed, Paul Rowley's doing a fairly good job with Salford. They seem to be consistently do fairly well now, Salford.
Did you see my analysis of them a few weeks ago? I said they were a bit gung ho. I don't know what they've changed. I've not looked at them for a while.
I remember that funny one you said about the defence, and you called it the new defensive style, the rectangle.
Look, there's something else to be said about rugby league in both hemispheres. It's very hard to play top-level rugby league all the way through the year now, particularly in Australia.
Yep.
And as a result, I think some good teams end up looking poor and some poor teams end up looking good. Part of me thinks a lot of them aren't as good as we think they are. Like, I don't think in the NRL there's an absolute standout team this year.
Agreed.
People are throwing things at Souths at the minute, but I just think they're in their purple patch now. They've got a long way to go, in my opinion, and they can't sustain what they're doing all year either. And there's no good doing it in April if you're not going to do it in September.
Yep.
Penrith aren't the force they were last year. Cronulla on their day look like the best team, but keep having the odd day where they fold. They're quite poor. Cronulla remind me very much of South from a couple of years ago, in that they seem to be travelling great and then they'll just lose a game that you don't expect them to, And I think the same can possibly be said of Super League, what I've seen at it. Wigan now aren't the Wigan of 20 years ago. The Leeds aren't the Leeds of 20 years ago. I think a lot of standards have dropped in Super League. All my English brethren over there, they hate me saying it. They think I've forgotten what it means to be British. No, I'm just truthful. The standard of the game over there has dropped significantly.
I agree, and I'm not just saying it to follow what you're saying it, because going back, we said going back before, but going back to the early 2000s, the calibre of players who came from NRL then.
That's right. Ryan, Steve Renouf, Brett Dallas. Brett Dallas played most of his career at Wigan in the end, I think. And that's a fellow who played Origin.
And before that, Greg Florimo, before that came, he was London and Halifax.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty, yeah. We used to compete for those names, and now we get players that nobody's heard of. Or players that struggle to get in wooden spoon teams that are now Man of Steel.
Or players that have had controversial incidents in NRL, so they've come over.
Yeah.
Ben Barber.
I'm a massive Jackson Hastings fan, right?
Mm.
And I think in a good club, he'd win trophies in Australia. But the reality is he only gets picked up by teams now that are at the struggling end of the ladder. And he got Man of Steel in England and got 2 teams to a grand final. So that puts that into some kind of context. Brodie Croft couldn't get in the Broncos side when they were wooden spoon favourites.
I see names pop up in these team lists that have only ever played Q Cup or New South Wales Cup.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be your Peter Sterlings and your Alfie Langers and your Melvin Ingers and those guys that would go over and get gigs in the Super League. And the Super League used to, I don't think it was even called Super League back then, but, they'd attract the cream of the Australian competition. But now, like you guys have both said, it's sometimes it's a place where guys need to go to get away from their own misdemeanors, and others go there because they can earn a coin and that they wouldn't get in Australia because they wouldn't play A grade.
Part of me wonders what the heck they're doing going to England to get away from the misdemeanors. They've also not been out in Pontefract or in Manchester or in certain parts.
Definitely.
Newcastle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a weekend in Newcastle lined up for the Magic weekend. 14 of us going up there. That should be fun.
Okay. Mate, I'm actually going to throw in another topic because you mentioned Magic. In England, where's the best Magic venue? I mean, it's been at Newcastle. It's been at Man City's ground. Mm. Was there a Magic at the Millennium Stadium one year as well? Have I got that right? Or Murrayfield?
It started at the Millennium Stadium, I believe. I think that's where it started. And the Etihad and there's Newcastle. The tried Anfield 1 year, but it only lasted 1 year at Anfield.
Okay,
maybe because that's a bit far out of Liverpool city centre.
Have you got a favourite venue out of all of them?
I like Newcastle. I like it as a city, but it's also fairly central for the city centre.
Oh, it's right in the middle of it, basically.
So how does it work? How do they allocate where it's going to be each year? Is it a bidding thing, or is it a rotation thing, or how's it work?
It's been at Newcastle a while now, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. Apart from the Anfield year, yeah, it has. It was at Cardiff for a few years. Was it at the Etihad for a couple of years, about 2012? Because I
seem to think it was, yeah.
I remember Adrian Pertell had a health scare in the dressing room at half time in the Bradford Leeds game. And that were about 2013.
Okay.
He had a heart attack in the dressing room, I think.
Jeez.
Half time. Yeah. That was at the Etihad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where would you like to see Magic Round in Australia, Chris? I know you're benefiting from it being in Brisbane, but...
Yeah, I am, but I was only thinking about that this afternoon and adding it. I think you've preempted one of my topics, Lee, because I actually would like to see it being shared around. I think it's fantastic in Brisbane, don't get me wrong, and it's well supported. But I think it's also an opportunity to grow the game in Melbourne or Perth, or I think you'd have to take it to one of the biggest cities just to make sure that you can fill it each week. But I'd like to see it go to Melbourne. I think Melbourne, being the sports mad nuts that they are, I think they'd patronise it well. But then again, the AFL, being as militant as they are, may well do everything they can to lower the crowd numbers. But I would, Lee, and Auckland, take it to Auckland.
Mm.
I think it'd be great for rugby league to take it to Auckland and have all 8 games there, and even explore. Who's to say it has to be all at one venue? Could we split it across 2 cities, or would that dilute it? I think we could think a little creatively about it. But it's a great concept. I'm glad we stole it off the Poms because I've enjoyed it.
What year do you reckon the first one was in England, James? I looked at this yesterday.
I think it was about 2008.
I think it was 7. Like that. 7, I think.
Was it 7?
7, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, round about then. They're actually talking. One of the things that IMG have said is that this is the last one this year.
I believe so, yeah. Why?
Successful? I don't know. I don't understand that, really.
Wow.
Seems, yeah, which is one of the negative things that they've come IMG is causing like it's a big new thing over here, but that's quite negative to me. It's something that's worked.
So in the UK, it started in 07. In Australia, it started 2019. A full 12 years later.
How does the ground hold up over there?
How
does the ground hold up? Well,
it's
and over. I mean, if you don't, you wouldn't have as much sunshine. I'm assuming you wouldn't have as much sunshine.
You've got to remember, Chris, that they're playing on a football stadium, and the budget that goes into looking after those fields, and the money in and around the Newcastle United club, particularly now, it dwarfs anything you can imagine going into Suncorp Stadium.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's not like Suncorp is neglected either. The other thing is, there are so many games at Suncorp at the minute without Magic Round. Redcliffe use it as the home game. Queensland Reds use it as their home venue. The Broncos use it as their home venue. And there's been concerts on it in the summer and whatnot. So, it's probably not an apple scenario, because right now Newcastle United are playing once a fortnight on that field, basically, aren't they? And it's like a carpet, mate. It's the technology on the fields over there is phenomenal because of the money involved. Did you have another topic, James?
Yeah, I've got one or two actually. I've got the one that's fairly one that I regard very, very highly in the sport as tactics. The importance of support play.
Oh, support play. Talking of support, I think the supporting actor has just arrived. I think he can hear us, but we can't see him yet. Taylor Brown, calling Taylor Brown. Taylor Llewellyn connecting to audio. He's on his way in. So the importance of support play. We'll hit Taylor up with this. Taylor, the importance of support play.
Mate, first of all, hello, gentlemen. How are we all?
I'm all right, lad. How are you?
Yeah, really good.
Flown in from Sydney to Sydney, sorry?
Yes, I have. I've flown into Sydney town. I'm just trying
There he is. Look at him.
There we are. G'day, gentlemen.
Look at that head.
Very relaxed.
Oh, yeah. Just got to the room, mate. So
he's got jocks on.
Wouldn't say relaxed quite. Yeah. I've still got pants on, so that's how you know I'm not relaxed. I'm not. and a little hot tip for the listeners and the viewers: I do tend to do the podcast in the nude. I just have a shirt on, so I haven't had time to unpack my bag. I actually brought my Dolphins jersey to represent on this beautiful Monday, because the Dolphins did the Sharks. But the importance of support play, as you said, is huge. Lee, I think it's the difference between a really good 5'8" half fullback, between a good one and an average one.
We said that earlier, didn't we, about the 5'8" Danny Maguire?
Yeah, we did.
I just think some of the best 5'8" in history are just known for it. And that's actually one thing that I will say that has impressed me about Jackson Hastings. Jackson Hastings is a very good support player, backing up through the middle. That's one thing he's brought to the Knights. And then you see it in the best fullbacks in the game, Dylan Edwards, James Tedesco. They just sniff around that centre of the field like a bad smell. Cody Walker's very good at it as well. But yeah, it's huge for a side. If you can get that front foot and then you've got some backup, it can turn a half break into 4 points.
Taylor, at risk of you either repeating something we've already discussed or you're not having anything prepared, have you got any topics you want to discuss? Because we're on the home straight now. We've got about 10 minutes to go with that for our usual hour.
Well, Lee, I actually spoke to you the other day. We caught up. You were at Redcliffe coaching a young fella up there on the peninsula, and I was actually down at training for my young fellas team. So we did have a chance to catch up for about 20 or so minutes. And I did tap you on the shoulder and said, remind me about this subject when we go on the podcast. I don't know if it's been brought up yet, but the $15,000 fine to the South Sydney Rabbitohs for having an extra man on the field, I think is one of the most ludicrous things in the current game that I've ever seen. The NRL controls the interchange. They have an interchange official accompanied to each team, and they stand there and dictate who can go on the field at what times. To then turn around and say, "Oh, there's been a problem, you now have to pay us," is crazy. It's madness. What is the purpose of having that man stand there and do his job if there's going to be no accountability for him taking control of that? Now, I can understand if the clubs have had control, but they don't. They just do not have control. And apart from a player running on the field and making a tackle when he's clearly supposed to be on the bench, I don't see how it's the Rabbitohs' fault. I really don't see it. But yeah, I thought that was crazy, and I wanted to get everyone's opinion on what they thought of that incident, if they had any memory or any recollection.
We'll go in order on my screen, left to right, the first one being me. I don't think it was big bickies. It didn't change the result. Crack on. Should have got a slap on the wrist. Chris?
Oh, look, I'm of pretty much the same opinion. However, I just vaguely recall in reading about it, was it because the player didn't actually give the card to the interchange official, so he kind of took matters into his own hands, the player? Or am I misremembering?
Oh, look, if the player has the card in his hand, he gets the card from his own team, then he has to give the card to someone. Even if it dropped on the floor 2 meters from the interchange official, does it really matter? Are we going to argue over spilt milk? And the more, I get that the NRL has those funds, but that just takes more away from the South Sydney Rabbitohs and what they can redirect that money into. And I guarantee you, it's not coming out of the purse of anyone that's in the back office. It's coming out of the club's kitty, and that club's kitty should be going towards junior development and other areas of the game.
Yeah, and look, I 100% agree. It certainly didn't affect the game.
What do you think, James?
Well, yeah, it's not affecting the game. And what was he on for 15 seconds, according to this I'm reading now? And there should be an official watching that.
I mean, what damage can you do in 15 seconds?
Well, maybe Adrian Morley at the start of an Ashes test.
True, yes.
Thinking about that one. Yeah.
I think Taylor's mind was in the gutter when I said that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in a hotel room and I'm thinking about all the damage that's been done in here in 15 seconds. Yeah. And I'm starting to get a bit iffy.
Mate, I'm not letting you jump in without getting this question. What Star Wars character would you be? So between the last podcast and this one, it's been May the 4th, Star Wars Day. So what Star Wars character would you be? James said you'd be Jabba the Hutt. I said Luke Skywalker, blonde hair. That was nice. Who would you be? And what would everybody else be? So Tim Cheeseman, we've decided, is Chewbacca, Raneel and Ewok, and I'm Han Solo.
I'm going to be a bit of a Darth Vader here. I cannot believe that I have a job during the week. I'm a sales representative. On the weekends, I get paid to talk about rugby league and stuff from the QRL through my commentary. I talk that much crap, and I still can't believe I didn't come up with a topic like this. This is terrible.
Well, what I would say is you're Darth Vader because you have a split personality. Then you've got a job, and you've got so there you go. There you go.
Darth Vader I'll be with the face.
Anakin Skywalker. What's
Anakin.
James? We struggled to get James. James might be the evil Emperor Palpatine.
He's a stormtrooper with that skull cap on. Have a go at
it. Yeah.
I said Chris could be Obi-Wan, but he's a bit too grumpy. All right, the next one. So in your cases, it'd be a hall pass, but your celebrity crush or crushes. I'm going to go right to left on my screen. So that's you, Taylor. Look, Naomi says you've got a hall pass or 2 or 3.
Well, Scarlett Johansson and I have always had an intimate connection, and I felt that through various devices, phones, internet, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But when I was in year 10, and Lee, you wouldn't have known me quite yet in year 10. I was just before I met you. But I remember going to a Black Eyed Peas concert, and I had long hair pushed to the side. I had a fluoro purple V-neck on. With a shark tooth necklace. It was all the rage. And I could swear to you that Fergie looked me dead in the eye as she was singing a song. And, I think Fergie'd have to get it done because we shared something that day.
She was all right then back then, Fergie, and she loved you a long time.
And I'm thinking, as I'm here at the Hilton thinking about her, I wonder if she's somewhere thinking about me. And I think she might be, honestly. Yeah, that was deep, that.
I'm sure she watches or listens to the Rugby League Coach podcast. James?
Probably Liz Hurley.
Yeah?
Shane Warne seemed to like her as well, didn't they?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Do you reckon you'd do as good as a job as the Spin King or what?
The King of Spin.
Yeah, well-flighted deliveries there, perhaps. Yeah.
Couple of bouncers.
Yeah.
A bit too much grass on the wicket for spin, I reckon. But anyway.
Yeah.
Chris, this will be some 1950s actress that we've never heard of or something.
Not quite the 1950s, but it has to be Kylie.
Yeah.
Oh,
You can't get her out of your head, can you?
No. I'd do the locomotion with her any day of the week.
She's spinning around your mind. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
And who's yours, Lee? Elton John?
I hope you don't mind.
Blue Jean Baby.
Tiny dancer. No, there's a lady called Jessica Plummer, who's an actress in the UK who goes well.
She wouldn't be a
Cheryl
lady
Cole,
if she had anything to do with you, though, Lee, would she?
Cheryl Cole, the old lead singer of the what were they called? Girls Aloud.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tidy, and traveling well. To be honest, mate, I've probably got an extensive list. Actually, I probably change it quite a lot. There's but yeah, they're definitely the two that sort of stay in and around. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Do you reckon we're crushes of anybody's, Taylor? Like,
I don't know about you blokes, but I 100% am.
oh, I'm on the QRL TV.
Yeah, 100%. Someone's got an eye out for me out there. I don't know who it is, but they're out there.
So you flew into Sydney.
Yep.
A bit late.
Yeah, so we had delays at Brisbane Airport from high winds and things like that. In
Cold, isn't
Sydney.
it? Cold tonight.
And it is cold. And then when we got to Sydney, because of those winds, they were actually reduced to one runway.
Is it cold in Sydney?
It is. It's about 14 degrees.
So it's colder than here.
Yeah, it's quite cold. And we were sat on the runway for about half an hour. And then the rental cars these days, you've got to pick it up. You go to the airport and sign in, then you've got to get on a bus to go to where you pick up the car from.
That's ridiculous. You need to get a bus to get to the car.
It's a schmozzle. And then when I got here, I'm staying at the Hilton. So when we got here, it was a bit of a rendezvous to get to check in. So
rendezvous.
So there was just a bit going on. It was full on. But anyway, we're here. We survived. So we got to it. I'm right next to Centrepoint Tower.
Okay.
I'm about 100 metres from the base of Centrepoint Tower, I'd say.
Why don't you go out for a walk and see what you can do?
Well, I don't know if you guys can see. Can I flip my camera? It's not letting me. But anyway, that's the base. We're right there.
Yeah, nice.
Right at the top.
Nice.
I've been up there with my dad.
Have you?
Cool.
I think he wanted to throw me off.
Maybe.
Well, unless you've got anything to say, Taylor, we might wrap this up. We've been going an hour, lad.
Well, fella, did we have a chat about Magic Round?
About 15 times.
Yeah, see, and I thought it might have been played out by the time I got on here. But I'll tell you what, I went to Magic Round on Saturday. And the atmosphere was electric. It was my first time ever. And
whole house, wasn't it? All 3 days.
Yeah, well, what a great concept. I just loved it, mate. And the atmosphere was really good. They did the whole kiss cam and everything on the screen.
Who did you kiss?
They didn't give me the option, and I don't think the wife did anyway. She was with me. But yeah, no, they did the kiss cam and the dance cams, and there was just a really good vibe about the whole crowd. And
you know what thing makes me chuckle at halftime at the Broncos? That the sting, the running, the guy who runs around and you've got to beat him in a race. That just cracks me up, and I'm not the kind of person who likes that kind of thing. But that just cracks me up because I think it's because he's in tight lycra and he's got like his face covered up and everything like a Power Ranger. You know
what I first thought when I saw him? I thought he's obviously a really good sprinter, probably Australian standard, Queensland standard. And I thought, imagine training as hard as you do for all your life, and you can't quite make a buck out of it. And someone says, "How about you sprint at half time?" and you just go, okay.
And honestly, James, there's some people. If you imagine a field, right? If you imagine the corner flag at the northern end, and then you have to run to the southern end, round the post, and then or whatever, and then to the other corner flag at the northern end. There's some people who start about halfway line from the other northern end, And he beats him, doesn't he, Taylor?
Yeah, he does. He's very impressive.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that before he puts that mask on and walks out to the stadium, it's a bit like Will Ferrell in Blades of Glory, as he's used to be the Olympic skater and he's coming out to do the kids show. And as he puts his mask on, he just goes, I hate my life. And just puts it on and runs out there.
Well, on the subject of Taylor talking about masks in a hotel room without his wife and without his undercrackers, we may leave the podcast right where it is. Chris, you got the little earbuds in this week? Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I am concerned. I've just noticed that in the corner of my hotel room, I've got a connecting door.
Oh, hello. Make sure
on?
it's locked, or else you might get violated.
What's on the other side?
Just knock on it and say hello.
Nah, it's deadlocked, guys. I've just checked. It's all good. Everyone
that's
calm
all
down. Everyone calm down. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm still laughing at the visions of the guy receiving his letter saying that he's finally made it. He gets to do the lap at Suncorp Stadium.
There will be somebody sat there thinking, I want to be the Sting's replacement. There will be someone.
Yeah, it's me. I just don't have the sprinting skills.
Mate, imagine you in the Lycra.
Oh, you don't have to. I used to do triathlons when I retired from footy. I used to don the Lycra every Saturday and go for a ride.
Mate, I've worn a fella who competed at the 2000 Olympics for Australia. I wore his Lycra for a staff versus students race at a school once. And yes, I did put stuff down there to protect the view of the Niagara Falls.
The protect the view or enhance the view?
A bit from column A and a bit from column B right there.
It's all advertising.
Yeah, that's right. But trust me, it was very tight. Like he was a slender figure. And
one of those ones where you went to the gym a few extra times that week, did you?
Not with 3 hours notice that I was wearing it, no. All right, boys.
All right, gentlemen.
Yes.
Thanks, lads.
So we organised it on a Monday for Taylor, and he didn't even make it.
I didn't even make it. What a stitch up.
I know.
Well, next time I see Richard Branson, I'll put him in a headlock for you and let him know what I really feel.
Take
care, boys.
Get Richard to do the first half hour next week.
Yes.